Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel. My name is Sophia, and I will be the chat moderator. You'll just see me a little bit in the beginning and at the end of this session. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. There is a chat box for questions to the speakers. These will be answered at the end of the session. If you would like to participate, you can use the emoticons that are available to you at the bottom of your Zoom screen under reactions, such as thumbs up, hearts, clapping, just trying to get engaged. Everybody's microphones are off for this session and that it is being recorded. There will be a survey at the end of the session just to give us your feedback on how you felt about it. So just a little disclaimer before we begin again. This training is offered through the Crisis and Recovery Enhancement Center, which is funded by the California Department of Healthcare Services. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the California Department of Healthcare Services. In this case of any security issues that may occur, the session will immediately end and will not resume. A separate email will be sent to all participants with further instructions. You are welcome to use the chat box, but please use I statements in chat and avoid making comments that are stigmatizing or otherwise injurious towards others. If you need support at any time for difficult feelings, please feel free to exit the session and go to the Feel It to Heal It room where you can access crisis and warm lines and other supportive resources. So, thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to hand it over to our panel.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Welcome everyone to our session. My name is Dr. Alan Lipscomb. I will be your moderator for this panel discussion. In addition to serving as the moderator, I have also worked with the organization that is Tri-City, specifically around anti-racism work, looking at how do we do anti-racist practices within our organization and program in ways that are just, that are equitable, that honors and recognizes diversity, but that also practices inclusion. And so I started and embarked on this collaboration journey about 7-8 months ago with Tri-City. And so today we have representatives from Tri-City who participated in this 6 to 7 month process with myself, assisting in moving in an anti-racist way. With that being said, we are going to have the panel introduce themselves first. Then I will move into some questions specific for the panelists. Then we will open it up for questions that you all have for the panelists and also myself. When we get to the Q&A portion, I am going to ask that you all put in the chat box questions you have. And if you have a specific question for a specific panelist, if you can start off by typing in their name first, followed by your question so that we can direct the question towards that particular panelist. If it's for all the panelists to answer the question, then just start off by putting all, followed by your question that you would like for all of them to answer. So without any further ado, I am going to turn it over to Remy to introduce herself. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Lipscomb. Hello, everybody. My name is Remy Hundal. I am the Director of MHSA and Ethnic Services at Tri-City Mental Health. I like the two combos, the MHSA and the Ethnic Services, because I get to make sure that no matter what Tri-City does, especially with the implementation of MHSA, that we are providing culturally relevant services. And with that, I will move on to Keneal.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Remy. My name is Keneal Mason. I'm a mental health specialist here at Tri-City in our adult outpatient program. I currently run the foundational recovery group, so we're basically groups for clients that are first coming in to Tri-City. So we're gonna like the first people they see in a lot of ways after the intakes, which is a lot of fun. I've been with Tri-City for almost 4 years now, which is crazy to even think about. I initially worked in our full service partnership department where I was out in the field on a consistent basis, working in the streets of Pomona, Claremont and Laverne, going to clients for about 2 years. And I moved over to the adult outpatient program. And it's been quite the journey. I've learned so much. It's been an incredible experience, and I'm excited to kind of provide some details on this training and how that the JEDI anti-racist training really affected us. So I'm looking forward to kind of sharing more with you guys, and I'll pass it over to Bruce.
Thanks, Keneal. I appreciate you. Hi, my name is Bruce. My name is Bruce Trong. I am a community navigator here at Tri-City. I'm one of the newer faces here at Tri-City. I've been here for about a year. My role here at the company is to provide resources and services to our community members and our clients, from looking for medical assistance to guidance with their Social Security or anything in between. So it's been a good year, but good year for me to be here. And I look forward to being here with you, and appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Gordon. I'm a clinical therapist with our adult FSP full service partnership program. So I am part of the field-based program. So we do go out into the field, into the trenches within our Tri-City area, Pomona, Laverne, and Claremont. Also dealing with our clients that are having those increased impairments along with being severely mentally ill. So I enjoy the rush of it. I enjoy the unpredictableness of FSP, and I look forward to sharing some of the things that we worked on with Dr. Lipscomb as well. I'll pass it on to Kimberly.
Thank you, Janine. Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Concepcion Higgins. I'm proud to say that I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And the reason I say proud because I just got my licensure like a few weeks ago. Anyways, I've been in Tri-City. Thank you, everybody who is clapping. I've been in Tri-City for about 3 years now or so. I started with the FSP program, so the full service partnership. So like Janine and Keneal, I went out in the field, right? As Janine said, the trenches, right? It's a pretty exciting experience. After a year or so, I moved to the adult outpatient program, did therapy with clients individually. And then now I'm actually co-facilitating with Keneal the foundational recovery group. So we're holding the group as the initial phase of treatment in Tri-City. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, panelists. So let's go ahead and get into it. Before I start to ask you all questions, just to provide a little bit more context for folks. So towards last year, the end of summer, beginning of fall, I received an email from the executive director at Tri-City asking if I would be open to meeting with the team, the leadership team, about providing some additional training and support, specifically around anti-racism and how do we engage in this work with each other in conversations. One of the things that was very clear to me at the beginning that the ED made very clear is that they've had trainings on like implicit bias. What does that mean? How do we understand it? And they wanted to get more into it on the interpersonal level. How do we have these conversations and how do we move in way as a collective to truly support these ventures from the top all the way down and throughout the organization? So that's how I got introduced into it. And so with that being said, I'll go to the first question. What did you all think when your organization introduced the initial idea to engage in this justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, anti-racism training series? And I want to start with Remy for this one.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I was a part of the team that spoke with you. So what we were doing at Tri-City, we started a cultural competency committee in July of 2010. And we have been meeting as a committee, and for some time it kind of fizzled off, people stopped coming. And then we revamped our cultural competency committee, and we got our staff from each department in the organization to come participate. And these were not supervisor, no management staff, because we wanted to hear from staff. And having a supervisor in the room just changes the chemistry of the room. So we wanted to really hear from staff doing the real work, what is going on out there. So that happened. And then in December of 2019 is when we started forming our committees out with community members. So the first community council was formed was for the African American community, called AFWAC, African American Family and Wellness Advisory Council. And we started meeting monthly, and little by little we formed the other groups as well. other cultural groups such as the Asian American Council. Then we have the Latinx Advisory Council. We're slowly going to be, and then we started LGBTQ+, and now we're slowly going to be working towards having a TAY Council and Advisory Council, as well as older adult advisory council. So then in January of 2021 is when we took a proclamation to a governing board to declare, to affirm that racism is a public health crisis that results in disparities in education, employment, economic development, public safety, criminal justice, family stability, physical health, mental well-being, and housing. And that's when we really realized the work that we needed to do. And the past year has been really difficult for everybody, no matter which community you belong to. And it's been really difficult for our BIPOC communities. So that's when we really needed Dr. Alan Lipscomb's help. And we had already started working with him, but then the proclamation came, and it was really something that we needed to do. And we've received good feedback from our staff, and we'll get into that later, and we'll talk about that. But that's how really it started, and brings us, that's how we are here today. And our true hope at Tri-City is to make it an anti-racist agency, and we're slowly working toward it.
Thank you, Remy. Same question for you all. Camille, what did you think when you were introduced to the idea that your organization was going to be engaging in this training series?
So if I remember, like back when it first was introduced and this was coming up, for me, I initially was like, oh, this sounds cool. But like, I was a little bit skeptical, honestly, just because we've had a number of trainings like this in the past. You know, it's normally like it's 1 day, maybe 2 days. And it's like, all right, we move on. You know, we're doing other things. We have a lot of things to handle. However, I will say, once I saw who was running it, Dr. Lipscomb, you've actually done a couple of trainings back at Tri-City in the past. That made me a bit more excited. Because I know that we've been able to kind of, the trainings you ran were really effective. And I was actually very curious on how, what JEDI actually meant. And the whole idea of what that means. You know, I know Star Wars and stuff of that nature, right? So the acronym made sense to me, but I was very curious on exactly what it meant. So I was excited once I realized, I read through the whole thing, you know, as far as what the invitation means, who's running it, what the purpose was, and it made me a bit less skeptical going into it. But initially I was a little bit, but it was good.
Thank you. Bruce, same question.
Yeah, and you know, I didn't think much of it at first. In my experiences, companies will mention doing some kind of initiative to bring attention to diversity, and you'll never hear about it again until, you know, something happens and they're forced to deal with it. So to see our agency, you know, not only talk about diversity, but to actually be active through these trainings is new territory for many of us. It was the very first time for me to be in a virtual room with other staff members and engage in conversation about diversity at this level. There was doubt, you know, there was some confusion. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, no one's going to speak up because, you know, we all like to stay employed, right? And this wasn't a fear that derived from Tri-City. This was a general fear that I had, you know, with any workplace. So I remember you, Dr. Lipscomb, you were asking us questions that many of us were uncomfortable answering. And although they were uncomfortable questions, they were appropriate because we needed to respond with uncomfortable answers. And that's the only way for us to learn from each other and to move forward together, because, you know, we need to engage in challenging conversations to be able to face challenging situations, you know, whether it's at work or at home or out in our communities. So, you know, and I think by introducing the JEDI, you know, anti-racist training, it was a great way to lay out the foundation and to set the tone for our agency.
Thank you, Bruce. Janine, same question.
Thank you, Dr. Lipscomb. I also wanted to say, Remy, thank you for giving that background, because that kind of helps, not skew, but it brings a little additional context on where the agency's kind of mindset was bringing this in. I, like myself, kind of mirror what Keneal says, that, okay, every year you're mandated to have cultural competency. Let's see what they say. And just like Keneal, I had a training with Dr. Lipscomb prior. So I knew once I saw the name that I was locked in, because I know the passion that doctor presents with and what he's passionate about. So I said, okay, we might be onto something. And so then at that point, I really wanted to see the agency's intention and heartfelt, because of the culture of the world, because of what was going on. And I felt this incessant fire in myself, where I'm going to hold you to it. I really want to see how intentional this is. And I knew with Dr. also moderating this, I knew it was going to be powerful. So I think I was just really excited to get engaged and to really see how open people are, and if, as far as open to perspective, to education and accountability.
Thank you. Kimberly, same question.
Everyone already said what I was gonna say, so there you go. The perks of being the last one. When it was first brought up in Tri-City, I like keeping an open mind, like especially with when we talk about culture, because it is very diverse, that topic in and of itself. So I wanted to give it a shot. That's kind of my first impression of it. And I was also really excited because, like, as a therapist, right, I want to enhance the whole competency thing, the clinical competency part of it. At the same time, I also want to deepen my understanding with people who don't look like me, right? Like, because that's really what it boils down to. Like, in order for a change to happen, we kind of need to get that understanding first, that insight first on other people who have different experiences. So that's kind of where I was at. My headspace was.
Thank you. Thank you all for your honest answers to that question. I am going to move into the second question. I'm going to start with you, Kimberly, but before I do that, just to give you a moment to take a breather, I want to share something, because I know some of you might be thinking, I'm curious, what was the format or the way in which you did this work with Tri-City over the past 7 months? And so the way in which I did this was, first, like Remy was saying, I met with the leadership team to get an idea of what is the vision, what do you want to do, and how do you want to work in partnership with me? One of the things that I look for in partnering with organizations as a consultant is, what are you already doing? What does your level of commitment and accountability to this work? What was it like before me? What is it like going to be with me? And what is it going to be like beyond working with me as well? Another thing that I look for, specifically related to who I am as a Black male professional, is I look for organizations to collaborate with organizations that want to partner and not tokenize me as the Black male coming in talking about anti-racist work, right? Because when there is not this partnership and we're just bringing you in to do this and then you leave, it's a setup. It's a setup for success, for failure, not success within organizations. And so what I did initially was, we had trainings with everyone at Tri-City. They had initial training on what is JEDI and anti-racism. How do we engage in conversations like Keneal was talking about? And I've learned something over the years. You need a good title to get people interested, right? And so that was to make sure we are all speaking the same language when it comes to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, anti-racism work, to really have the conversation and hold ourselves accountable and collectively accountable. I did those two. And then following those 2 sessions, I did a series of small intra-group sessions with those at the organization who had similar maybe roles and positions, were grouped up in small groups of about maybe 10 folks, 10 to 15. And we did those 2 sessions. Then we did inter-group dialoguing, where we mixed it up with different positions, titles, demographic mix, intersectionality, identities, etc. And 2 of those as well with everyone in the organization. It was a little bit larger. It was about 20, 25 people for those groups. So I started in November and I worked with them all the way until the end of April, beginning of May. With that being said, second question, and we're going to start with Kimberly. What would you say was some of the most challenging parts of engaging in this work, and what would be some of the more rewarding based on your experience of doing this work?
So I'm going to start with the challenging bit. It's easy to overlook and forget the importance of this type of conversation because of our work, right? There's a lot of people who depend on us. And then if we're being honest, we're just like, I'm just gonna sit here and do my job. That's kind of, at least that's how I was raised as an Asian American. So there's just no time. Like, that's kind of the challenging part of it. But like with any behavior or skill, right, it can be honed. It can turn into a habit. So that's kind of how I think about that challenging part of it.
Mhm.
What makes it most rewarding is how it actually impacted me personally. So since the whole training started, or this entire process, I've actually been going like headstrong into my own culture and learning more about myself and the importance of being represented, the importance of being heard, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's the most rewarding part for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. Janine, same question. Most challenging and rewarding.
I think in thinking about the challenges, just overall kind of acclimating to this training and also incorporating it into the agency was really about, I guess, what we take away from it. What I've noticed is that, you know, we were all very transparent in the beginning, and then now when the doors are closed, there's silence. And really, I think the challenge is not really knowing where people stand, how it resonated with them, and how do we continue these conversations individually. I'm one that, you know, I kind of bulldoze my way through things, and I'm very vocal and advocate not only for myself, for my clients, and especially all the intersex involved with all of the client work that I do. And so I think the most challenging, and I'm going to be honest, even kind of the frustrations and the, you know, things that are upsetting, is that when myself feeling so motivated and empowered and this great information shared, and now the doors are closed and it's quiet again. And so I think for myself, I'll keep that advocacy piece up, still having difficult conversations, calling people and asking, why has the communication stopped? And just still being that voice. I guess that kind of goes into the rewarding part. Additionally, going into the rewarding, it definitely has ignited the fire. I definitely have been a big advocate for all of my clients, but I felt this overwhelming urge to really get into the social and the cultural advocacy. And so now I feel that with Remy was stating that we've kind of broken up with Tri-City with different cultural, can't recall what they're saying, where we all are,
committees.
Yeah, like the African-American groups, is now I feel like, okay, it's my seat at the table. I have this more direct connection with Tony, with the director, where I actually can use my voice. I actually can say, here's some of the things that I've noticed that I'm going to speak up. And that's very rewarding to have just push everything aside and create my seat at the table, which has allowed opportunities like this, which I never would have imagined. I never would have thought, but now my mind is spinning like, how can I do more? How can I be the face of the things that we want to change? And so what I take away from that is not allowing anyone else to tell my story, to tell the culture's story, but allowing us to be at the forefront to show you this is the work that needs to be done within these different cultures and intersex.
Thank you for that. Bruce, same question.
You know, I would say after the trainings were introduced, you know, there was a lot to process. I know many of us were skeptical at first because, again, you know, like Camille and Jeannie was mentioning earlier, we thought that we were just doing this, going through the motions. And like I mentioned before, the agency won't speak of it again until they have to. The training is introduced, and now I think the challenge is now there's the buy-in, right? Should we as staff members buy into what is being done? And can we trust that this will be an ongoing program? You know, trainings about diversity and cultural awareness in the workplace, you know, are typically condensed into a small slideshow, right? Where you click forward and you take a quiz at the end, and now you have fulfilled your training for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Right. So, but now you have an agency that is asking you to be a part of a forum and have a conversation with your peers and your management team to talk about what have your experiences been like in the workplace and what can we do to improve. However, it can be a scary endeavor for a lot of folks. You know, what will the agency think of me if I speak up? You know, will I get in trouble or worse, get fired? You know, especially for those who may have spoken up before and felt that they had been treated unfairly after speaking up. So again, you know, can we trust that this brave space is actually what it's meant to be, right? And so far, I think it's been fairly successful, and this is where the rewarding part comes in. You know, it's a slow process, but this is absolutely going to be a marathon, right? We are, so far, we've been hearing some great feedback from employees who have been here for more than 10 years, you know, telling me, you know, and saying things like, it's refreshing to see that we are able to come together and bring up these topics because we were never able to. So, you know, I firmly believe that, you know, many of us here at Tri-City, we want to be here. and be here for a long time. And I'm sure it's like that for many folks out there in other, various agencies. And to be able to tap into the human part of us and not see us as another part of the machine, it gives us incentive to come in every day and be the best worker we can be. So
thank you. Camille, same question.
So there was 3 different challenging aspects that I wanted to kind of focus on. The first was what Kimberly was mentioning about like just we're working like and we're moving, like we're moving 150 miles per hour and like trying to just stop and slow down, like, okay, hey, this is the training. And it was a little bit different on the virtual piece, because normally when these trainings are in person, right, we're walking across the street, and it's like phones off, computers are still in the office, so it can just focus. Compared to doing some of these trainings in the virtual, where our emails are still coming in, right? Clients are still trying to call and things of that nature, which sometimes was a little bit of a challenge in itself. The other piece as well is just the idea of being able to listen and not always want to be vocal and go first. Many of my coworkers know, I'm very vocal. I'm very open, and especially I was very comfortable with Dr. Lipscomb. So he asked a question. I'm like, yes, I'm ready. I got the answer. Like I'm ready to share. So what I also wanted to make, I had to kind of check myself and make sure that I wasn't just dominating the group, right, and not allowing other people to speak that might not be as comfortable, right, but might have very important things to say. So that was something that over the course of these, and especially once we got into the intergroups and things of that nature, I really tried to make sure that I took that time. And then the last piece as well is that once we got into those intergroups, it was there's the executive team, right? There's my boss's boss, are in the room, and it's like, how honest can I be, especially sometimes when I might be critical of Tri-City, or I might be critical of some of the things that were going on. And that was an initial challenge of like, how transparent can I be, right? But that challenge actually led into the most rewarding part, was I could be extremely transparent. And the executive team was extremely transparent. I happened to be with Tony, our executive director, with Gary, our program manager. I was in that group, and I was like, oh no, I was scared, right? I was initially of being like, oh, how, because I'm an outspoken guy, of like, how far am I gonna, like, how far can I push this? What can I say? But they were actually probably even more outspoken, and more instrumental in kind of preventing that, making that safe place. And that was awesome to me to see that, and kind of see as we went along, people that were more quiet, or people that weren't initially very open to speak, becoming more open, and more willing to share and do those things. And I thought that was the most rewarding aspect, that this became a safe place for people to talk about the variety of different issues and things that we might not always talk about, right? Because we don't want to get in trouble, or because we don't want to, whatever reason, just being able to have that space. And it was truly that. It was truly an open area where we could speak about whatever was going on in terms of things here at Tri-City, and even times we were talking about racial things in our country, right, and things of that nature as well. And really being able to dive into that was extremely rewarding to me.
Thank you. I think one of the things that Camille brought up that I think is important to note before I go into Remy is that it was great that I didn't know all the players and who everyone was. I knew, of course, the leadership team, the executive team, but I didn't know. I got familiar with folks throughout doing intra and intergroup. And so when Camille was in that particular session, I remember it because I didn't know who his supervisor, if a supervisor was in there, or what it was, because it's a mixture. That's part of intergroup dialoguing for our audience. You really want to diversify it. And so that was a beautiful session to hear you talk in front of the executive director, your supervisor, and their responses to that too. So thank you for sharing that. Remy, same question, challenges in rewarding.
So my challenge is a little different, because there's always the other side of the story, right? So my biggest challenge was how do we create a safe space, not only brave, but also safe space for our staff to be able to speak up. These are difficult conversations we're all going to be in it together. How can we make sure that staff understand that nobody gets fired for speaking up? Nobody gets fired for saying the obvious. And we needed to hear that from our staff. So that was very challenging. The other thing that was challenging was to keep my feelings out of it, because I needed to hear what everybody is saying without being so in tune with my feelings, right? So how do I do that? How do I not get defensive and jump in and say, no, wait, we're doing this. And this is the reason why we have Dr. Lipscomb in the room. So that was that was a big challenge. That was something that I really struggled with. How do I stay quiet and when do I talk? And I found myself sometimes even private chatting with Dr. Lipscomb and saying, am I supposed to say something here? Or am I supposed to stay quiet? Because that was very difficult because there were questions directed to the leadership. And I had answers, but that's not what was the right time to do that. So that was a big challenge. And what was rewarding was that we learned a new skill. So thank you, Dr. Lipscomb, for that, is calling in, not calling out. And that was very good because later on, after we learned the skill and our staff learned the skill, we were called in. The leadership team was called in by many of our staff, and they're not here, and saying, hey, did you think about this? And very done, very professionally, very well done. And you know, to be able to tell our staff that we're human, we only know so much. And we do need to hear from you. And that's why this is important. And it's important for you to call me in. But how do we create that safe space for somebody to call us in? Right? That's hard. And as Bruce and Camille, everybody, you all touched upon it a little bit, that how that is, everybody is fearful of whatever reason, whatever is going, you don't know what will come out of this. So so those are the two things that I wanted to highlight. And let me see if I have anything else here. Yeah, no, that's all.
I love that. I love that, Remy. And for those of you, if you had a chance to go to my earlier session, I talked about some of these skills like calling in versus calling out, which I am not the person who created that. So let me just acknowledge that. Tran wrote about it in an article titled Calling In versus Calling Out, a less disposable way of holding each other accountable. And you can just Google that, calling in versus calling out, and you'll find a lot of information on that. But I was able to come up with an approach to calling in, and that's the part that I created, was a new approach to having these conversations. And what Remy was talking about also was practicing cultural humility, that I can listen and allow for multiple truths to be shared and questions to be directed, but not to be reactive, to be responsive, to be considerate, to be thoughtful. And we can have critical conversations in a way that is respectful, but also critical. And sometimes people feel like, when I call in, does that water down the message? And the answer to that is no, it does not water down the message. It actually allows for it to be delivered and received, right? So we have two more questions. So the third question: what have you learned about yourself, and or what have you learned about Tri-City during this process? And I'm just going to open this up to anyone who wants to answer, because I know some of you already shared about what you learned about yourself. But if you want to add anything, what did you learn about yourself and or Tri-City?
I'll go ahead and speak up first. One thing that I learned about myself is that I really needed to actually do some more work internally with myself as we went through a lot of the intergroup sessions and hearing people's perspectives from different cultures, different races, and those microaggressions, things that kind of reinforce that I walk around just culturally, generationally, that chip on my shoulder, and hearing certain things being triggered with, I'm not going to say ignorance, but it is unintentional ignorance, but also that I needed to work on that myself, that I still had struggled with triggers from the historical, the generational, the systemic traumas that culturally that I have. And I noticed that I was triggered. I noticed my emotions kind of coming to arise and wanting to kind of pounce. And like, how can you still in 2021 say that? But still holding myself back and allowing that person to share their truth. And even on the positive side, them acknowledging their unintentional ignorance and wanting to learn. So I think it kind of comes full circle that I recognize that I still need to allow some grace for myself, as well as work internally on some of the things I maybe didn't realize was there, just because I think culturally, especially being a Black woman, there's certain things just existing and going through life and going through just trying to survive every day. You have it, you just kind of guarded, you have this armor on. But I felt like listening to these different perspectives and being triggered by it, that I needed to stop and pay a little bit more attention to myself. And I think that that's work that, that's going to be everlasting. But that was something that I did not expect the emotional rise out of these sessions. It was good and it was bad to bring it to the surface, but it definitely was, it was overwhelming in a good way.
Thank you.
I can go next. Really quickly, the idea for me is like I felt like I needed to expand like my bubble in a weird way. And what I mean by that, and Dr. Lipscomb, I'm not sure if you remember, but during the training I mentioned about like how because there's so much stuff as far as racism and things of that nature in the Black community, right? Like that's like I'm focused on it, you know, where it was like that was like that's like these things that are going on are so bad and are so severe, or these things that are happening. It was hard for me to really even think about these other cultures that are going through a lot of stuff. And I mentioned about watching a TV show that mentioned like on the Asian American perspective, and kind of realizing like how while there's a lot of stuff going on, right, especially with the George Floyd, with all these other things that were happening in our country at the same time, at the same time there's a lot of things happening to the Asian American community, right, as far as with the COVID and things of that nature. And it took me, and I kind of needed to learn, I needed to kind of take that step and also be like, okay, these things are also happening outside of my race as well. All these inequalities, and they matter just as much, right? And that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about me wanting to answer everything, you know, and me wanting to kind of go up first. And I had to make sure that I wanted to, like, I need to sit back and listen and hear everyone else's perspective and see these other things that are happening, even if, and kind of make sure that they also kind of, they matter, right? These things, they are all important, and they are these unequal, these unjust things that are happening in our country. No matter to like, who the race is, it's not, I can't just think about my people, you know, or something of that nature, and the stuff happening out there. So that was the big thing I learned about myself, was like, I want to really expand that bubble. I've really been trying to do that. And as far as from Tri-City, what I've learned again is that it wasn't just a, oh, here's another yearly training, you know, that there is that next level of depth and caring that Tri-City has, as far as trying to include that diversity. And that the executive team, that the head members were willing to kind of, sit back and listen and kind of accept that constructive criticism, you know, and things of that nature. And I thought that was super important, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how it was going to be, like, you know, kind of taken, you know, in a lot of ways, or if it's going to be like, okay, sure, you know, and kind of move on. But they were willing to engage in that conversation, you know, to kind of ask back, okay, what did we miss? What can we have done? You know, what were these things? And it showed, like, again, like, they cared, you know, this wasn't just another training, another type of deal. This was a actual attempt to really try to get on top of this issue and kind of really improve Tri-City as a whole. So that's what I learned from.
Go next. So for me, more than ever, there's that emphasis and importance of being seen and heard, and feeling like we're seen and heard. And I think that's the most important thing that I learned about coming from a culture. I'm Filipino, and coming from a culture that, in general, I don't want to speak for all Filipinos, but coming from a place where we prefer the majority culture. We prefer imported products. We prefer, like, you know, the white culture or something like that. Recently, with all of these things happening, and there's that call back to understanding more what your culture is and what your culture is about, and that call to represent your own culture. And it really starts with the way we interact with each other. And I like one of the reasons why I like where, you know, that Tri-City is starting to do this, is because, you know, I see the change, and I see that they're willing to listen, like, as everyone is talking about here. And actually, I wanted to talk a little bit of a tangent with a recent movie that came out, Raya and the Last Dragon. For anyone who has seen that, it's a Southeast Asian love letter. Anyways, so what spoke to me about that, and what we're talking about here as well, is Raya took the first step, right? The first step to change, the first step to understand, to seek out the other person, and it helped save the day. So anyways, that was kind of why what I learned about myself, like, just that passion in me to represent and to learn more and to listen more.
You know, Remy, would you like to go?
No, you go, please.
Oh, please. Thank you. You know, I was never one to speak up about, you know, diversity or lack of representation in the workplace. You know, I was raised in a Vietnamese family, and just like, you know, Kimberly was mentioning, you know, like other Asian cultures, we were told to focus on our jobs, you know, and to never rattle the cages with anything that may affect our livelihood. You know, our role is to do a good job. You know, don't disrespect your bosses, you know, and do it again tomorrow. And anything else beyond that is a distraction. You know, we need to just sweep it under the rug and keep marching on, you know. And on top of that, you know, like I mentioned before, the companies I worked for, you know, never really did much with diversity and representation, right? I worked for a company that would send out blast emails to employees for National Donut Day or National Puppy Day, you know, and that's and which is cute and fun, you know, but not once did I ever see a you know, something like Happy Lunar New Year email, you know, or something like that, right? And I'm used to that, you know, and in fact, I'm not even sure what's worse, you know, being used to not being represented or not expecting it because it's normal, right? So when Tri-City gave me a space to express myself, I never realized how much I cared. You know, I was so numb to the situation that I often find myself wondering, you know, what kind of person am I in this community? Since I don't have much to say, you know, do I not care, right? So moving on, fast forward to today, you know, I'm chair of the new AAPI Wellness Advisory Council, you know, here at Tri-City. We're bringing staff members, other agencies, community members together to discuss very, you know, these very topics, you know. We are sharing our experiences and ideas, and we're helping each other process with what's going on, you know, especially with the current events that's going on in our communities. You know, we are engaging with other minority groups, you know, and forming alliances and, you know, and supporting each other. And, you know, we're learning from one another, just like Camille said, you know, and though it's a slow process, it's definitely been encouraging, and it's been a great start.
And I just wanted to say that most of you know, as the ESM, I'm very passionate about this work, right? And when you hear me talk about this, I've heard staff say, oh, we hear the passion. But what I realized during these group dialogues and intra-group dialogues is that I talk about telling staff, you have a voice at the table, but we didn't create that space for the table to be there, for the voice to be there after that. So these dialogues helped us create that. And I hope that we continue to do that as we go on. And just so that my staff, our staff hears this, that we are also hiring a new person whose only job is going to be this, that things that we have learned today, until today from Dr. Alan Lipscomb, the position is going, the job description is going to the governing board next month, is that we're hiring a diversity and inclusion coordinator whose only job is to make sure the councils are running. There's a newsletter. We are celebrating everything and keeping in mind the holidays that are not supposed to be celebrated, but to just bring awareness. People forget that, they think everything is celebratory, but that's not the case, right? So keeping those things in mind, educating our staff, our community members, and creating that real space for the voice to be at the table. So that's something I learned about myself, and that there's so much more work to be done, and so much that I need to count on our staff to help us get there. We can't get there alone as the leadership team of Tri-City. We need all of us to be in it together. So I also want to say thank you to you all for being here today and for doing all that. I know we have more questions, but just led to it.
Yeah, and you know, time flies when we're having a good dialogue. And so that concludes our kind of Q&A back and forth. What we're going to do now, we are going to transition to open it up for our attendees to ask questions. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you have a specific question for one of our panelists or for me, make sure you put our names first in the chat and then followed by your question. If it's for all panelists, you can put all followed by your question. And while you're doing that, I will squeeze in my other question. While we're waiting, in a couple of sentences, what advice would you give to other organizations who would like to do this anti-racist work at their organizations and programs?
I would say once the momentum begins, don't let it die. Let the fire burn, and continue this with intention. This work has to be intentional, and make sure that your staff hears the intention behind it.
Also being genuine about it, you know, giving it an honest effort and really reaching out and really like seeking to listen rather than the other way around.
I'd like to also add the inclusion and not just limiting it to the powers that be putting the feelers out there, testing the temperature of your staff, how people are feeling, what are we missing, what do we need to look into, and make it a whole agency approach on how do we make this better as far as kind of introducing this into our agency and this type of training and acceptance.
I would say, again, like that transparency piece, be open, share, even the little things that you think are like almost like, oh, common, or like things you almost ignore, right? These things matter, right? Like we talked to Dr. Lipscomb about clients, especially with the virtual counseling, they see me for the first time and it's like, oh, I thought you were white, or things of that nature. And kind of like, and I might, a piece of me didn't want to bring it up. It's like, oh, that's so small, that's not even going to matter. But when I did bring it up, it became a huge discussion. So just everyone just be transparent and share all these things, even the little things, they matter, and they might be what another person isn't wants to say, but isn't ready to say, right? And you could ask that question for them. So transparency is a big thing.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. And I would say, by doing this would be a great start to start the movement. It's a great way to start the movement. Instead of sugarcoating or beating around the bush when it comes to diversity, it's really time to just face it head on, right? Come to the realization that your company needs, if this is what your company needs, then you really want to understand the folks who are the backbone of your company. Try to understand them in a human way, right? This is not just a community issue. These are human issues, and it goes with us everywhere we go, especially at work, right? So it's going to be uncomfortable, to say the least. There are going to be hurdles that we must jump, and there's going to be walls to break down. But if done consistently and respectfully, we can finally begin to feel safe in our workspace, and look forward to coming to work every day, the way it's supposed to be. So, it can get your voice heard. And if you're like me, it'll help you discover your own voice, and that can lead to others finding their own voices too. So thank you.
Nice. Okay, so perfect timing. We have a question coming in. Sasha would like to unmute themselves. Yeah, would you be able to unmute Sasha for us? Give us 1 second, Sasha.
Can you do that, Dr. Lipscomb? I don't know if.
Oh, did they leave? Let's see. Let's see if I can unmute you. No, I don't have privileges.
Yeah, I tried to. I couldn't do it.
Sophia, Sonia, there's Sonia. Sonia, would you be able to unmute Sasha for us, or unmute all participants? You can unmute now, Sasha. Thank you, Sonia.
Okay. Sorry, sometimes it's easier for me to verbalize it than write it out because I have so much to say. So I work with a county agency, and I'm a very vocal person. I like educating people. So when I work with staff, when I work with consumers, and they get uncomfortable, they say certain things around me, and I kind of stop the conversation there. I get clarification and I try to educate in that moment, right? So as to not have that continue like in further in treatment or in further conversation. So for me, it has definitely worked in being like a vocal individual to just address it in that instant. But I think for me is sometimes I feel I can be too vocal. So especially in working with a government agency, you have to not necessarily watch what you say, but in a way you have to be a little cautious. And there are times I'm willing to kind of just go for what I feel and just let things play out. But there is that time, there are times when I do hold back and be like, okay, well, is this the right place or the right time to do this or to address this? And for me, a lot of it starts with like educating a lot of our higher ups. So I try to be, involved with a lot of our cultural competency committees, whether it's just all of them, because I want to be able to be knowledgeable about all the consumers that I'm working with. So I think my question is what do you guys see as the best way to address certain situations, especially in this type of agency, like a government type agency where there's a lot of politics involved.
And Sasha, did you have that question for a particular panelist, or was it to everyone?
I would say whoever wants to answer.
Perfect. I'm gonna say Janine.
I guess he picked me because Sasha, I think I kind of mirror some of your bulldozing ways.
There's some kindred spirit going on.
Yes. So, I mean, I'd like to think that with Tri-City, even though we're our own authority, we're still a government agency. And I think that there's that natural fear that, like Bruce had mentioned, about what do I say? Would I say the right thing? But then sometimes I have to also be a little introspective and make sure, first, what is my intention before I say it? Am I saying anything offensive? Am I saying anything wrong? Is it vice versa? Or does this need to be said? And I think, like you mentioned, sometimes things just need to be said. But I think there's also value in when Dr. Lipscomb talked about like the calling in versus calling out, and taking on different approaches of how to either address certain situations so that it can be received. And then it could be, that who it is, it could be accountable for. But then I also share the sentiment with sometimes things just need to be said to start the conversations. And knowing that when I say things that it's intentional, it comes from a good place, or if I'm feeling oppressed or not heard and I have the right to, so I will, hey, you don't hear this. I don't know the right way to say it, but I'm just going to say it. So sometimes those things need to be said because it starts the conversation. And so what I found, and where there's the comfort in this, is so far my mouth has not gotten me in trouble. It has opened up a lot of conversation. It has encouraged other people to say, oh, I'm so glad you said that. And then it's encouraged their wings to kind of broaden as well. So I definitely think that incorporating the pieces that Doctor has talked about, maybe looking into additional communication and interpersonal strategies to have those conversations. But my personal recommendation is don't dim that light, don't dull that fire, get the message out if it needs to be said.
Thank you, Sasha, for the
I wanted
question
to
too.
add
Go ahead,
something to that. So if it's a particularly difficult question or situation, it's also okay to, to pause a little bit, and have them or yourself kind of sit with the elephant in the room and then come back to it. Like it's okay to do that. So that was one of the points that Dr. Lipscomb talked about.
Pausing, yes.
Yes, pausing is important.
Yes.
And good awareness, Sasha. Good awareness. Yes, that's where we start. Nice. I want to go to the question that was put in the chat box for me by Tessa. She said, Dr. Lipscomb, how do you recruit / mandate staff who need to participate, but they choose not to? To be clear, are you advocating that leadership and staff in our community come together in these sessions? So I'll answer both parts. So I do not mandate or recruit. That is something that I look to the organization to set the context and the foundation that they have already given a big picture. Like, why are we doing this? Why is this something that we're making mandatory for all staff to participate in? What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? And I offered them, and they wanted to make sure that I did this, multiple session times so that everyone can fit this in with their schedule. And again, I worked with them over 7 months. And so, yes, I do advocate for leadership and staff to come together, because this doesn't work if I'm just working with staff or if I'm just working with leadership. And so really doing that, they are going to be doing some work with the community and doing like some springboard listening sessions and intergroup dialoguing with community members, providers, law enforcement, so on and so forth. So the work still continues beyond. I hope that answers your question, Jessica. In the same room in meeting is my question. Oh, when I'm actually facilitating the intergroup dialoguing, how do I do that, you're saying, Tessa? In the actual session, how do I get folks to participate, you're saying? Okay, got it. I try to set the stage by modeling. I try to anchor it with the things that I talked about when I do those initial trainings with them, like practicing grace in space. I say calling in as a gift to bring it to their attention. You're doing it because you respect them. I use prompting, probing questions to get the conversation started in the dialoguing. I do some container in talking about what this is not, how this is and is not going to be used outside of this space. And I think initially there is a lot of apprehension, rightfully so, but with time, because we do multiple sessions together, so it's not just like a one-time thing. I think over time, folks start to feel more comfortable. And I think the other thing, Tessa, is people are ready for more talking versus trainings. When you work with organizations that have been trained till they were blue in the face, they are like, we need to talk more about this. Like, we need to have more time to unpack this. So it's just nudging it a little bit, but folks are, it's right. They're ready. They want to. They're just figuring out how to do this work. And so that tends to happen. And then the relationship that I develop, and then leadership modeling when we do the intergroup sessions, that, hey, let me just acknowledge the fact that I have an executive position here. And please know that, yes, I get that it feels uncomfortable, but no, kind of like what Remy was saying, I am listening. I'm going to be quick to hear and slow to speak. I am not here to judge or smack down or be punitive. So all of that matters to allow folks to feel more comfortable sharing in the space. And I would say we had close to 200 people participate in the intra group sessions and the inter group sessions, small group sessions, but total. We have about 5 more minutes. Any other questions? Feel free to come to the mic. I believe it's available for you all to unmute yourselves. If not, you can put it in the chat box. We are also going to put our email addresses in the chat box. So if you have some lingering questions, or what I like to say, if you like to be, percolate with stuff a little bit longer and it comes to you a day later, next week, and you're like, that's the question I want, please feel free to send us an email of this. Again, this is being recorded. So yes, this will be made available for folks to continue to watch this back later. Any final questions?
Dr. Lipscomb, I'd like to say one thing
Please.
too. I believe it was Tessa who asked about how you're engaging and how that all worked. And I just wanted to kind of give the aftermath of that and say, Tessa, that everything that Dr. Lipscomb really resonated with all of the groups. All of us titles are at the door, and it really has bridged the relationships and the communication with leadership. I personally, I got an email personally from Tony, who's our director, and I had to like clutch my pearls when I got it. Like, she knows my name after all of this. I responded solely to her. I do feel like the walls kind of have come down. I feel comfortable going to anybody in any position saying, I have a question or this. So I definitely feel that what Dr. Lipscomb said, it helped to bring us all together. It's not that the executives are not inaccessible. We can access them. And I definitely can say there's fear that's ceased, and we're slowly getting there.
Yes. A couple of thoughts as we're wrapping up. We have like 2 minutes left, 1 minute left. One, I think it's very important to start somewhere versus nowhere at all. 2, don't underestimate the power of community, connection, and dialoguing, because it truly helps. It truly brings about awareness and it allows for folks to come forward and do this work. Be ready for the long haul. This is something Bruce touched on. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And we really have to be committed to doing this work as individuals, but also collectively, regardless of where you're working at. And I think the final thing I would want to put it toward, put Janine on the spot to share her quote that I fell in love with during one of our intergroup dialoguing sessions that I think is powerful. So if you mind sharing that, and then I'll wrap it up for us today.
Yes, the one thing that I always remember is that I cannot expect myself from other people. So the way that I engage, the way that I'm able to express myself, I can't expect that from everyone else. And that's where I'm allowing others to have their own grace in their own space as well.
On behalf of myself and the Tri-City family team, I want to thank you for being vulnerable, being open, being willing to share and reflect on what your experience has been. I hope to you all who are holding virtual space with us that you take this with you, these narratives, these experiences, and really move forward with pushing this along in the work that you do as individuals and collectives. Thank you to the CARE Training Conference organization too for allowing us to be here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. Remind them to do their feedback. Fill out the forms. Thank you, Sophia. You're like, wait a minute, you're real smooth closing it out, but we got to make sure they do give feedback. Please give feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. Let us know what you thought about this session. Please, please, please. Sophia already put it in the chat box. Again, you have our email, so please get that down before they close out the session. Thank you. Sophia, do you have anything else? Okay. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.